To make one cotton t-shirt, it takes 2.5 years of drinking water for one person. In Bangladesh alone, since 2005, 1,800 garment workers have died. Companies who use sustainability in their marketing are now getting sued because they're misleading consumers. Am I actually buying a sustainable product, or is this just a marketing ploy to get me to buy more? So we're going to get into all that today, but first let's start with a little personal history. I used to be, I wouldn't say a full-on shopaholic. It wasn't like I was spending a ton of money or like buying a ton of new things, but I shopped a lot and without purpose. I had this spark of inspiration one day when I had just bought 3 new tops from Target. I brought them home, and the next morning I went into my closet to get dressed and I was like, I have nothing to wear. And I kept thinking like, this is a problem. If I've just bought 3 new pieces of clothing and I still feel like I have absolutely nothing to wear. From there, I did a huge closet declutter and I decided to put myself on a 3-month shopping ban and only use a very small portion of my closet for those 3 months. So that was like my very first capsule wardrobe. I ended up doing this capsule wardrobe process for about a year. At this point, I was shopping a lot less. I was having fewer clothes. I was being much more selective with the clothes that I did bring in because I wanted them to fit into that capsule. And then I watched a documentary that changed my life, which sounds so shallow to talk about like a documentary about fashion changing your life, but I think about it all the time. Like probably on a daily basis, I think about this documentary, and I watched it years and years and years ago. It's called The True Cost, and it's about the human and environmental impact that the fashion industry has on the world. And a couple of things that stood out to me in this documentary. The first was every seam on your clothes was touched by human hands. I had this misconception that all of our clothes were sewn by machines and automation, and that's not true. Our clothes are sewn by an actual human being. I also learned a lot about how poorly garment workers are treated, especially in developing countries. They're working 6, sometimes 7 hours a day, long hours like 14 to 16 hours, occasionally denied bathroom breaks, lunch breaks, and a lot of times there are deaths. In Bangladesh alone, since 2005, 1,800 garment workers have died. The most notable is going to be Rana Plaza, which was in 2013, I think, in Bangladesh. And it was garment factories that were in a large, I think it was an 8-story building. The structural integrity of the building had been severely compromised. Other businesses in the building had evacuated knowing that this building was likely to collapse, but the garment workers were not allowed to. And they continued working and the building collapsed and a lot of people lost their lives. And learning these things kind of really opened my eyes to like, if I'm buying a $5 t-shirt, how much did the person who made my shirt make? If you have to account for material, for customs, for marketing, for brick and mortar stores, all the overhead that comes with a fashion company, how much did the woman in the developing country who sewed my shirt make? Did she have to be working 16-hour days, 7 days a week in order to support her family? And a lot of times the answer is yes. From that point, I really made an effort to reduce the number of items I was purchasing from fast fashion companies, knowing that their labor model was not something I supported. But then I continued learning more. Besides workers being treated poorly, child labor is rampant in the fashion industry. There are 170 million children being exploited worldwide for free or very, very cheap labor. And fast fashion is one of the biggest users of child labor. There are some countries where they force children out of school in order to pick cotton. It's something you don't think is still around. You just don't think children are still being used for labor. You don't think even adults are being forced into labor. But modern day slave labor and modern day child labor absolutely exists. And it's being perpetrated by the very cheap clothing we as consumers are demanding. And then I started learning more about the environmental impact that fast fashion has. To make one cotton t-shirt, it takes 2.5 years of drinking water for one person. That's a lot. It's a lot of water for one t-shirt. Textile production accounts for over 20% of freshwater pollution. Even on the consumer side, only about 1% of our clothes are actually recycled, whether that means recycled into new clothing or resold at a thrift store. And so most of the clothing items that we are decluttering, we're throwing them away into a landfill. I think pretty much all of us will hear that information and be like, yes, I'm on board with ethical fashion and sustainable fashion and not polluting our rivers and not having people die to make the clothes I wear. But here's the kicker. Nothing is changing. Even though this information is being shared more, fast fashion companies still reign supreme. And even fast fashion companies who are making an effort to go more sustainable or more ethical aren't making progress. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Of course, it's nuanced. The first is that there's still a lot of demand for cheap clothing. And in order to make cheap clothing, you have to cut corners in both ethics and sustainability. And the DNA in these companies is to get consumers to buy more. And if we know that if we buy clothes, a lot of them get donated, and only 1% of those get donated actually end up somewhere we would like, that's not a sustainable model. Which leads me to believe that sustainable fashion is just a myth. It doesn't exist. It's just a marketing ploy to get us to feel better about the clothes we're buying. I mean, what does sustainability even mean in the fashion industry? It really depends on who you ask. There's no definition. There's no capital T truth there. It's just a word that makes you feel good that you're supporting the environment. When I see a company using the term sustainable, I'm thinking, no, you're not. There's no way. This is just deceptive marketing. You may be using organic cotton, you may be using recycled materials, but are you still producing 52 lines of clothing a year for us to buy? Are you still encouraging me to consume more that will eventually be thrown away? If so, you're not sustainable. Even one of the most notable sustainable companies, Patagonia, has dropped using sustainability from their marketing because they've recognized that it's not possible. And it doesn't mean they're not going to try to make company processes that support environmental issues like water pollution, but they recognize that true sustainable fashion isn't possible. There are so many examples too of companies who use sustainability in their marketing, like responsible, conscious, and they're now getting sued because they're misleading consumers. The other thing that really bugs me about sustainability is it doesn't account for how workers are treated. I just think the human impact of fashion is so ignored with the sustainability movement. We're so focused on the planet and the earth and environmentally friendly that we're forgetting that people are dying, that children are forced into labor in order to make the clothes we wear. So what's the alternative to this? If we still want to be consumers that are buying from companies that we agree with their values and their ethics, how do we do that if sustainability doesn't really mean anything? Here's what I do. This is my approach towards making ethical and sustainable choices when I'm shopping for clothes. A better approach to this is going to be slow fashion. So when we're purchasing clothes, we're purchasing them for years to come, not to satisfy a micro trend. Companies are making clothes instead of releasing a new line every week. They might be releasing 2 or 3 lines a year. The most ethical and sustainable clothes are going to be the ones that are already in your closet. Take care of them, wear them, keep them for a long time. I used to do this all the time where if I had a piece of clothing that, had a stain or it had a hole or the sole of the shoe was coming undone, I would donate it. But like what thrift store is going to resell a shoe without a sole? Well, I don't know. I just wasn't thinking. I was using a thrift store as my local trash option, and I think a lot of people do that. So taking care of our clothes. So learning how to wash clothes right, learning how to treat stains well, learning some basic mending skills, getting familiar with your local cobbler and local tailor. And this isn't something I do often because it's an extra expense, and I get it. Like, we're all on the budget. We have to be conscious about the money that we're spending on our clothes, but it's going to be a lot cheaper to repair the clothes you have than to buy something new. Shopping with intention is such a key part of slow fashion. If you go to the grocery store when you are hungry, you don't have a list of things you need, we end up buying more food and spending more money than when we go to the grocery store with a list. It's the same thing with clothes. Back in my days when I was going to the store and buying 3 shirts and coming home and feeling like I had nothing to wear, a lot of it was because I wasn't shopping intentionally. My mindset now has shifted to what are the gaps in my closet? How can I fill them? There's still room for seeing something and having it spark joy and bringing it home with you. But that is the exception, not the rule. Whereas that used to be the rule for me. If what you have doesn't work and you do need to shop, my rule of thumb is secondhand first. So anytime I need something new, I'm going to be looking at secondhand markets before I shop new to see if I can find it there. And most of the time I can. This has been a huge shift in my closet since 2019. I don't think I had a single secondhand item in 2019 in my closet. And now I think it's about maybe 50% secondhand. That's a really, really big jump. I have a great video about how to thrift and find things you actually like that I'll link for you up in the cards, because we still want to be intentional with our shopping even when we're shopping secondhand. And it can be really easy to fall into a trap of it's really cheap or it's one of a kind, so I'm going to buy it even if it isn't quite right for me. And that can get us back into this fast fashion mindset where we need something, we need it now, we're just going to get it real quick. If I can't find something secondhand, I will, when the budget allows, support a brand who's supporting local artisans. The ethical companies I shop from most frequently will be from things that I can't buy secondhand, like socks and underwear. Those are typically lower cost from ethical companies. It's still going to be more than what you'd find at, Walmart or Costco, but you're supporting families instead of giving your money to a billionaire CEO. And if the budget does allow it, ethical companies have some beautiful pieces. They're just going to be a little bit more expensive. The reason they're expensive, though, is because they're paying their workers a fair wage. In the US, some garment workers make as little as $1.50 an hour. So if a garment does cost more than you expect because it's being produced by an ethical company, a big part of that expense is going to be because they're paying their workers fairly. Kind of the last tenet of slow fashion for me is to stop decluttering. I learned that so many of the clothes we declutter end up in a landfill, and yet decluttering is so glamorized now. We as consumers have a part to play in the sustainability movement of fashion as well, and that's to do our best to not contribute to landfills. A question that comes up that I wrestle with all the time is, now that I know it was likely a child picked the cotton in order to make this t-shirt, now that I know it was likely a woman who works 16 hours a day and got paid 6 cents per t-shirt, the question is do I still buy fast fashion? And this might surprise you, but occasionally, yeah. I have rules around it though. I will only buy fast fashion if there are 2 conditions that meet. It is an extremely time-sensitive need. The other condition that has to be met for me is a budget condition. For example, when I was pregnant, my body was changing very quickly. I didn't have any pants that fit me, and I needed to clothe myself. I needed to clothe myself. I searched secondhand and really struggled. There wasn't a lot of maternity options that would fit me because of my height, so I purchased from a fast fashion company. Life happens. If you are short on time, high on budget, I encourage you to look at ethical fashion companies instead. If you are long on time and short on budget, shop secondhand. And if you are short on time and short on budget, and it's something you absolutely need that you cannot go without, that's when I shop fast fashion. You're probably thinking, how can you do that after all the things you just said so passionately about why you don't shop fast fashion? And the reason is because there's always going to be something with a company I don't ethically or morally agree with. There's no perfect company out there. And if I only supported companies that I'm 100% in line with their ethics on, I couldn't buy anything. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be progress. From where I was 5 years ago, where I bought everything brand new from a fast fashion company, to where I am now, which is buying pretty much everything secondhand and very rarely purchasing from a fast fashion company, that's huge progress. And think about if millions of fast fashion consumers reduce their fast fashion consumption by even 50%. The market would speak volumes to these companies and encourage them to change their practices because they wouldn't be making money. I obviously have so many thoughts on this topic. This has been a video of just me talking so far, but I'm by no means the expert, and there are so many wonderful organizations and companies who have put in a lot of investigative research into this. And I'll share all that information down below if you want to learn more. A couple of my favorites, that documentary, The True Cost, fantastic. If you watch one thing, watch that. There is a great Harvard Business Review article on sustainability and fashion as a myth. I think it gives such a clear overview of how sustainability is being misused in the fashion industry and why it's not a possible outcome. Fashion Revolution is an organization that has a really good social media account too, sharing a lot of information about the environmental impact, the human impact, toxins in our clothes even. They have really great content. So I'll link that and a couple more down below for you to peruse at your own leisure. While our eyes have been open to sustainability, which is just a marketing word at this point, it doesn't mean anything, I think our eyes are still pretty closed to the ethical practices and labor practices behind some of these big brands. I hope I've given you some interesting points to chew on. If I did, leave me a comment below, and I would really love it if you would like and subscribe as well. Thank you so much for watching.